Hey guys, my name is Haley, and today I'm going to be filming a video title that I've had in the works for several months, and that is Books That Radicalized Me, which I know is a hot. Sorry, I got distracted by my earrings because I never wear these ones. I know is a hot ticket item with the current administration in the United States, so I figured I would take advantage of that and also be able to talk about books that really did change my life for the better and teach me a lot of empathy in different ways, in different forms, in different genres, honestly, over the course of my life. I will say most of these I read within middle school to high school, and then I have a handful. I really think only like a couple that I read after that I also just wanted to talk about because they fit the theme of the video. But yeah, let's jump right on into it. Also, if you can hear the wind, I'm hoping the mic dims it enough or some. I'm not closing the window. It's far too hot in here in Ohio for April. I think I have 12 books to talk about, and those are literally just the ones I could think of off the top of my head. So we're going to jump in. The first book is Tears of a Tiger. This honestly made me think of this video topic was there were so many books I read in middle school in particular when I was reading my way through the library. If you haven't heard me tell that story, I will leave my where my lore started book tag down below because I just talked about this in depth there. There was I had a very small middle school library and I read my way through the entirety of it, and this was one of the books that I picked up back then, and I've also started reading her books now as an adult, and it has made a huge impact on my interests at this time because her books are even more relevant now than they used to be, and they were pretty relevant back then. So, this is a book that deals a lot with racism. Pretty much all of Sharon Draper's books deal with some sort of either racism or like prejudice against anybody who is different from you. So, like in this case, this one in particular deals with, I believe it's drunk driving. Again, a lot of these are, I remember the feeling more than I remember the specific plot of the book. But this one, I remember there being a car crash with these teenagers who I believe had been drinking, and one of his friends passes away. And I think this book in particular is responsible for the fact that I never once considered that. I also just in general don't drive, but like I will not get in a car with somebody who has been drinking of any kind. So her books in general definitely radicalized me as a kid and continue to as an adult. If you've heard me talk about any of her books that I've read this year, especially, highly recommend Sharon M. Draper. Next up, I know is a common one that a lot of people have to read for school, and that is To Kill a Mockingbird. And again, I also just talked about this in my other book tag video that I just posted. And this one is definitely one that taught me a huge lesson on the concept of bullying and like making fun of anybody who does not look or act like you do, with Boo Radley in this book in particular. And it also showed me that there are people who are going to always fight for those that are not necessarily what would be considered normal by society standards, and that everybody has their own story, and that you have no right to judge and you have no right to make fun of people for something that is different from how you would think. So To Kill a Mockingbird's always a go-to for like English teachers, but it's one that I agree with because I don't agree with all of them, but that is one that I do. Next up is The Giver. I actually just talked about this last night with my partner's brother and his partner, but this one in particular I feel like taught me a lot about empathy because the whole concept of The Giver and also The Deep by, maybe I should have mentioned that one, The Deep by River Solomon, is that one person is assigned like the memories and therefore the empathy for like the entire community, and how that one person can only do it for so long because to contain everyone's emotions essentially in one person, people are not built for that. And in theory, it would be considered like an honor and like great for other people to not have to deal with the complexity of emotion, but also that means that there are no issues, which means there is no progress going forward. But The Deep also deals with this. I'll put up a picture of that because I'm going to add it to the list now that I'm talking about it. I also really liked this book because it ends on like almost an open ending of you get to decide where the main character goes at the end of it, which is what me and the friends were talking about last night. But This one definitely impacted me greatly. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of the movie adaptation, but I would have to rewatch it now to see if I still agree with that. This, by far, is one of my favorite books of all time, and that is Out of My Mind, also by Sharon M. Draper. And this is literally the story of an 11-year-old girl. Sorry, I want to refresh myself on the details of this because this one's important to me. She is disabled. I don't think it says specifically in here what her disability is, but I believe she is in a wheelchair. I do know that she is nonverbal, and the whole problem is that it is told from her perspective, but because she can't speak and she can't vocalize because of her disability, people assume that she is not intelligent. And the part of this I remember, and it's another thing that I feel like is one of those great things that we've done with technology, as many of terrible things as there are, one of the great things we've done is making people who are nonverbal, given them the ability to communicate. And her teachers and her friends and the people at her school realize how intelligent she is once she is given the tools that she needs to communicate with others, that she is very smart. She is much more than they ever could have thought. And they just had no idea because they had never thought about things from her perspective, and also because she couldn't tell them. So, this also, while being a commentary on disability, also I feel like is a commentary on just like giving children a voice and giving them the tools, whether they're literal tools like they are in this story of like the technology available to help those who are nonverbal, but also giving children the voice of being able to talk about their passions and talk about the things that they struggle with. It really tackles the idea of you never know another person's perspective, and we should consider all perspectives. So I love this story. I had no idea this was a series because I didn't even realize until recently that Sharon M. Draper had so many books. I don't think I even like connected this with Tears of a Tiger when I read it, but I'm going to get a hold of the other two books and read those because I love this story and I think more people should read it. Next up is another book I had to read for school, and that is The Outsiders. This is a book I read when I was very young. I want to say I was like 11 or so, and this is obviously a story against the greasers and the socias, and it's a very big commentary on social class, which was something 10, 11-year-old me had never really talked about nor thought about. So this is definitely a example of stories teaching empathy, which my goal is to talk about how each of these does that, and that is why they radicalized me, because I was taught empathy, because our schools in particular do not teach that the way other schools in other countries do, but that is a whole nother topic that I can get into another time. But this is definitely a pivotal moment that I remember how this book made me feel, as opposed to, again, not the specifics of like the story, because I read so much, a lot of specifics when it comes to storytelling and the plot will like escape my brain. But in this case, it was me going, oh, like people who are of a higher social class than me aren't necessarily that different. And that was a big concept for 10, 11-year-old Haley. The next book I want to talk about is Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. This is a book that we read over, like, as a class rather than like assigned reading, like a lot of books were in high school, especially. We read this as a class in my history class, and it is a look into the Vietnam War and the different stories of people that were involved in it. And this was one of the first times I remember talking specifically about that war, because I feel like it is a war that gets brushed over as opposed to like the big world wars, and how much it affected the soldiers that were involved in it and things that those people experienced. And now, as a more educated adult, I realize how pointless the Vietnam War was and how we just wanted to get involved in something that had nothing to do with us. And that has stuck with me, probably because this book was one of the first things to introduce that concept to me in a way that I could digest and wanted to look more into. Next up is a book that tore at my heartstrings, especially as a teenager. I might have read this in middle school. I believe it was high school, maybe early high school, and that is Speak by Lori Halse Anderson. If you don't know the story of this, this is the story of a girl, just a teenage girl, was pretty normal. I think she might have been popular at the start of this book. And one night she goes to a party and she is sexually assaulted by a man. And she tries to tell people about it, and they don't believe her. And Any woman who has been in that position knows that story and can relate to it, which is depressing but true. And this taught me a lot about speaking up for yourself, standing up for yourself, even if the tide or the popular people or whoever that you tried to tell these things to, in which they don't want to believe that terrible truth, to continue to stand up for yourself and to not just give in to the peer pressure of like, oh, that's not important, because this is important and it will always be important and your feelings are always valid. Next up, I feel like is an obvious one, especially for like millennials. I feel like this book in particular was like shoved down our throats, but also for very good reason, especially in the current political climate, as much as I hate saying that, and that is The Diary of Anne Frank. The fact that this book in particular, and a lot of these, honestly, if you go back through the stacks that I've just mentioned, the fact that this book in particular is banned should concern you. It should worry you. And we want to talk all about how, like, oh, the kids, like, a lot of the kids don't know about the things that we learned growing up. No, they don't, because they aren't teaching anymore, because half of these books are banned and the teachers can't do anything about it because of people like Moms for Liberty, who are banning things that can teach empathy to children. Is that the teacher's fault? No. Is that even the Department of Education's fault? No, because the Department of Education does nothing but fund. That's why I hate the concept of leaving stuff up to the states, because the states are the ones who set the curriculum, not the Department of Education. Getting rid of the DOE doesn't do anything. Sorry, I can feel myself about to go on a rant, and I'm going to reel that back in because I'll talk about that in a later video that I have planned. But this book being banned, of a little girl who was alive during World War II and the Nazi regime, being banned in the United States, in any state, in any county, should scare you, because this story is important and is more normalized now in the reality of so many people. The idea of banning it means people are trying to cover it up. I'm just going to come out and say it. So yes, this definitely radicalized me. And I'm one of those people. I had a friend who worked in the South in the school systems of like older kids, like fifth graders. And I remember her telling me that the fifth graders, her fifth, like 10, 11-year-olds, did not know what World War II was, did not know who Hitler was. I don't know about other millennials, depending on where you are from. Please let me know in the comments down below, actually, because I'm so curious about how this is taught, or how World War II is taught in other states, because I grew up in Ohio. I still live in Ohio. And I feel like 90% of my schooling, especially in middle and high school, was all about World War II. Like, we learned so much about World War II, to the point that I feel like I didn't learn very much about World War I. And yet there are fifth graders in Georgia within recent years who do not know who Hitler was, do not know about World War II. There are middle schoolers or even high schoolers, especially like within Christian curriculums, where they don't teach it at all. At all. That's terrifying. But I'm going to move on. And on to some more recent ones. I saved my fiction for last, or most of the better known fiction for last. So I'm going to go with one of my last nonfictions, and that's The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This is the story of the woman, the black woman, who's, what are they called? Hold on, I'm going to get this right. It's known as Gila, and how her cells were used in so many scientific breakthroughs in the last, like, 100 years, and she was never given credit. Her family was never compensated. They just took her cells and made so many scientific advancements for the benefit of the American healthcare system, and supposedly to help other people. And I know that these things have helped people, but to give no credit to the woman that they were stolen from, horrifying. So I highly recommend this if you want to read more about that story. It will infuriate you, I would hope. So that one definitely was a punch in the face to someone who never learned about that in school, or any part of my life, honestly. Next up, we have another classic. I did not read this in school, but I know a lot of people did, and that is Fahrenheit 451. All I'm going to say about this book in particular is this book is all about burning the books, right? And the whole idea is that paper burns at 451 degrees. The modern day equivalent of burning books, of which many places still do. I don't know if any of you came out of Christian youth groups where they would like burn stuff at the altar all the time. Yes, that sounds culty. Yes, it was culty and still is. The modern equivalent of burning books is removing things from government websites and just scraping things from the internet that are important historical documents or historical information. So keep that in mind going forward, especially if you go in to read this book. Second to last is this series. I read these, I believe I was a older teenager. What year did these come out? Why don't I know that off the top of my head? 2008. And I don't think I read them right when they came out because I was not as good at keeping up with new releases then. So 2008, I was in 9th grade. I probably read this in 10th or 11th grade was when I read the original trilogy. I actually don't even know how close together they came out because I want to say I read it before Mockingjay came out. So 2010, oh my gosh, those came out consecutively. Wow. That was a big deal back then. Books used to take years to come out. So the series was finished by the time I was in junior year of high school. So I probably read them around then. How I wish I had had a Goodreads back in the day to actually remember all of the books that I read in middle and high school, but I did not. I will say these books hit really hard even as a teenager, and why all of us loved reading dystopian back then was because they were like, okay, like the whole idea of dystopian is we don't want to become this. And with Sunrise on the Reaping having just come out, and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes having come out before that, rereading these, I have not gone back to reread them yet, but I plan to very, very soon and make a whole video about it. Rereading these as an adult or rereading the Hunger Games universe as an adult, especially with Sunrise on the Reaping, under the current regime, hits in such a different way and feels too real right now, the same way everybody who's been reading Parable of the Sower and Handmaid's Tale are like, now's not the time to read them, but also it is, but it's going to be even harder read than it was when these originally came out. And also the idea that Suzanne Collins only writes when she has things to say, and the fact that she's come out with 2 books in the last 2 years after taking at least a decade, if not longer, off of writing, should scare you, in my opinion. I also hope we get another one in the next year, as terrifying and as bad of an open as that should be for the world. These books definitely radicalized me, especially when we finally got that map, which I don't think is an accurate map, but that's a whole nother story because she didn't make it. The people who made the movies made it. When we learned that the Hunger Games, like where it is set, is the United States, that was like a bomb drop in like teenage young adult Haley's life. And the more I think about it, the more scary it gets, which it should. And then last, this one in particular was very personal to me, but I have to mention it in this video when it comes to radicalization, is Loveless by Alice Oseman. I read this coming out of leaving my church cult, which is, again, a whole nother lore backstory on my life. But I was in a very religious, very conservative church cult for 8 years, and I did not deal with nor look at the concept of my own sexuality because that is obviously frowned upon, especially in those circles. And coming out of that cult and also remembering at that time how I had felt as a teenager, especially during high school, about my complete lack of interest in dating and how like difficult it was for me to like even have crushes on people. And when I did, I had them for years. I didn't have like fleeting crushes. While I am not Arrow Ace, which the main character in this book is, this book in particular truly made me realize that I am demisexual and on the ace spectrum in that way. And it made a huge difference in me understanding my sexuality and who I am as an adult, especially in things that I probably would have figured out had I not been, figured out younger, had I not been in the cult that I was in which these books were banned. They weren't allowed. We weren't allowed to look at the concepts, and many other things, but Loveless, especially for me, radicalized my own thinking of myself, especially, and I felt the need to mention it in this video. But yeah, those are the books that radicalized me. Again, there are tons, like tens, if not hundreds, more books that have radicalized me in different ways, but these are the ones that I wanted to bring up off the top of my head, especially from my younger years. Let me know if any of these books also were ones you read when you were that age. Let me know what book has radicalized you the most in recent years. I will say a lot of my nonfiction I've been reading in the last year or so has made a huge difference, so I might make a nonfiction version of this coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.